Welcome everyone to this week's IPLD sync meeting. It's 14th of October 2019. As every week, we meet here to welcome everyone to this week's IPLD. Okay.
Somebody,
Yeah, it's okay, but the live stream works. I can hear myself. So as every week we go over the stuff that we've done and then discuss additional items that we might have. And I'd like to have a note taker. Any volunteers, or is it the same volunteer as every week? I guess and hope so. I start with myself. So yeah, I spent some time on really understanding the Rust serialization deserialization library, because like I still find it super complex, and I needed to do this in order to implement the deserialization for the CBOR stuff so in order to be able to deserialize tags in CBOR. There's the issue linked in the notes to find out more details about this. And then finally, the DAG PB spec got merged, which is also great. And I learned a lot about Rust error handling. Yeah, that's also, I think, pretty important and good. And then finally, there is a new GitHub helper in order to publish our notes on GitHub. It's also linked, and if you go to this page and click on create PR, it will be create a PR with all the information needed for this meeting, and we will be good, which is a huge time saver for me. It was fun creating because like new JavaScript on the browsers basically after IE6 is so easy to do. I'm so happy. All right, next on the list is Eric.
So I probably don't have a ton to report. I spent a bunch of time in the last week at the Ethereum DevCon, which was super fascinating. And I'm not sure that I have a very well distilled reports from it yet, other than I talked to quite a few people about IPLD things and about other serialization R&D that's going on in the Ethereum community. They are solving some of their own very specific problems in very specific ways. But we did try to establish some common ground and just like shared vocabulary development. So I'm hoping good stuff comes of that in the future, but we'll see. I pushed around a few docs PRs, a bunch of code gen stuff that is maybe first mentioned a couple weeks ago, got enough cleanup that it finally landed on master. So I've just got a clean workspace again, thank goodness. Excited about that. If you check out the master branch, you can now see unmarshalling that works all the way into code generated structures. So that's cool. Like, wow. And the rest of the time lately has been, I've had to iterate a lot on trying to figure out what a desirable shape is for the natively typed accessors and builders of code-generated stuff. And this just turns out to be like a really tricky problem because like, obviously ergonomics are tricky, but also getting this to be of good performance is like continuing to be super, super tricky as well. I learned some new things about how the compiler optimizes memory usage recently. For example, if I have like this certain struct layout where several things are going to get converted into pointers, sometimes the compiler will amortize that whole thing into one move to the heap. But in doing so, it might drag more structure in it than you actually needed. Keeping track of all the moving bits here is just really heady. So much like one of the phases of selector development, I've lost track of how many different attempts I've made at this and what draft number I'm on. but I think at this point I've gotten one that will be worth carrying on. So we'll see how that goes for the rest of this week. That's about it.
Cool, thanks. So welcome, Johnny, to the call. We are still on the updates. So next one on the list is Michael.
Hey, yeah. So I finished up the CodeGen refactor in JavaScript, so that's great. Does almost everything that we do in IPLD schemas, more than we actually had working in the last gen before I rewrote it. And it, it has everything that we need for Unix v2, which is what we're kind of driving it with. And it's way faster, way faster. The new one is significantly nicer and faster because I got rid of the eval stuff and just cleaner. So that's gone really well. Now I'm just back to Unix v2. Should have like a full reader writer by the end of the month in JavaScript for Unix v2. At that point, I will actually take the schema and publish it, and then we can have a long round of debate over all of the exact pieces of the schema. But I want to make sure that there's a working implementation before we do another round of feedback, because it's changed significantly since the last time that we did it. So implementations seem to drive a lot of this. So I want to make sure that the implementation is complete first. I committed to doing an MFS abstraction on top of that. That won't be the entire IPFS API, but it will be basically like a mutex on top of all the serialization and reading. You have to be pretty close to the serialization and reader in order to do really efficient operations. So I wanted to just knock that out. And so it'll be just like the other Unix v2 library, it'll be very reusable outside of IPFS, not bound to IPFS, like its own kind of abstraction, but it will just be one single sort of mutex that you can use on top of it to concurrently write and read files into it. And yeah, that's about it for me. I did have a question for Rod, though. Part of this should probably be the HAMP stuff. So it's sort of like there's like a to-do in there right now about that. We don't necessarily have the HAMP. We need the HAMP to be done like within the next month or two, but it would be nice to at least stage it so that it's coming in when we're starting to integrate in IPFS, so that we don't lose that feature or have to start doing integration before that's ready. So I was wondering sort of what you like, how you feel about the current HAMP. I know that there's still been some spec churn lately. And like when do you feel like that's probably going to be ready to be finalized?
I think it's pretty good. There's just one little change with storing keys that I'd like to make. My outstanding concern was really trying to unify with the Filecoin HAMP, but it's just been so hard to get engagement from them on that. So I feel that there might just have to be some divergence there, and I don't know exactly what the divergence is. I suspect it's mainly just going to be how things are laid out on the block. They've made particular choices, and that might just have to be like, we could probably unify that by having alternating schemas, like Eric's vision of schema matching for blocks. We could match a particular schema that Filecoin is using, and then we have an alternative one that's the default or something like that. That's really it, though. Aside from that, I think it's ready. It's just these outstanding questions of what are the best default values, and we just really don't know.
Okay, cool. All right, that's all for me. Rod, you're up next.
Okay, I was out most of last week, and I did do some work on the Go IPLD schema. It needs a little bit of catch up to get to where the JavaScript one is and the spec stuff is. And then there's some outstanding schema stuff in the specs repo. Eric, I think I need your engagement on int enums. That's, where is it? Yeah, pull request number 196. Wouldn't mind getting yes or a no on that. Or yeah. The representation, the JSON representation was the outstanding thing because of the discrepancy, and that's just for enums in general. Do we go with the union approach, or do we go with the members approach? So just some thought on that would be good, and maybe you think you've said enough in there, but so just some clarification would be good, Eric, at some point. But that PR is in the current the current status of that PR is where I left it off with the current representation thing. Everything's put into the representation rather than the members struct.
I'll give a fresh look at that.
Okay, that's it for me.
All right, I think we're
All
good.
right. So that's for the updates. Johnny, do you have any comments, questions, any update?
Not really. I'm still working on identity in the W3C work for the verifiable credentials using IPLD published to IPNS. I'm trying to do some CRDTs in the IPLD to, and I talked to Adine recently, or I guess back in Barcelona, about whether I need to implement that at the IPNS level. But I'm just keeping my ear to the ground, listening to what's going on with IPLD and how to implement it for the stuff I'm working on for identity.
Cool.
All right. So is there anything else anyone wants to talk about?
I'm good.
All right. I guess I then close the meeting. So goodbye, everyone, and see you next week.